we have a guitar player friend and a great songwriter named Bill Browder. And Bill, who, along with Mike, did all of the basic work and certain overdubs for Paul's new album, Rhythm and Rhymes. His daddy was a big advertising executive, a la Mad Men.
Totally
Except,
Mad Men.
yeah, Bill's dad was in Los Angeles. Well, so was Don Draper.
Mm.
But Bill's dad, unlike Don Draper, did not wear a bikini.
We don't know where this could have been.
That was a joke, you guys.
Bill was living in the Hollywood Hills.
Tried to help.
Yeah, Bill was in the Hollywood Hills. But we were talking that some of the iconic ads we've seen, like, I could have had a V8, or it's shake and bake and I help.
That's right.
You know, some of those iconic ads might have been in Bill Browder's genealogy.
Quite possible.
He could, you know, he could have grown up next to the beaver in the Ipana commercials.
He could have. He could have been the inspiration for it.
Yeah,
actually.
he could have.
We couldn't have done anything we did in our lives and careers without our fathers, come to think of it.
Yeah.
They kind of made it possible, didn't
Yeah,
they?
you know, that's what they call the Genesis argument, Michael. That's what they call the
Good
Genesis.
man, too, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Then there,
Can I tell you a quick story about my dad?
Yeah.
I grew up in Austin, born in '54 on Shoal Creek. I was a creek kid.
Hang on. That's a native Austinite.
I hear
right.
That is a rare breed.
Put me up in some formaldehyde on the shelf. Anyway, so my dad worked for the state of the health department up there on about 45th and Lamar.
Sure.
And he would sometimes go enjoy a beer at Kenneth Threadgill's gas station just up Lamar.
Sure.
And he would come home telling us about this incredible young UT student who played the blues and folk, and her name was Janis Joplin.
Oh, for
This was about
heaven's-
63 before she went
Yeah.
out to San Francisco with your friend Chet Himes and all that.
Well, yeah, and Powell St. John.
Right.
Yeah.
That's old Austin.
Another little,
Well, did he say anything more about Jan?
just that she was incredible.
Yeah.
And of course, this might have been Dad after a couple beers and such, but she
Well,
was
of
kind of
course-
doing folk and probably playing an auto harp. And
I believe the name of that band was the Waller Creek Boys. And I think it was she and Powell St. John and some other fellows in that whole Threadgill's ethos of weekly jam sessions with a lot of the folkies and what have you. As a matter of fact, Janis was voted the ugliest male on campus around that time, so I think she took refuge.
I thought she thought it was an honor.
No.
She
Well, she
sang
did.
a song about it, I think.
Well, she did play in the Waller Creek Boys. But back to you.
just another little creek story growing up with the musical kind of component. So my next door neighbor was a kid named Billy Wilmot, and he played a Farfisa organ. Maybe it was a Vox Jaguar. And I would listen to his band in the garage, and they morphed into the Wig, which featured Rusty Weir,
Yes.
and became one of the young buzz bands in Austin back in those days. So Billy Wilmot was really my inspiration for taking up the drums, which I started playing first. So anyway, that's my little neighborhood connection with some
Austin music history.
great Austin bands and personalities. Came right up off the creek.
So from the creek
Primordial Creek to the
kit.
to the Vulcan.
To the Soap Creek.
Yeah, Soap Creek. There you go.
Yeah, from the creek to the kit, drum kit. So you started on drums.
Started as a drummer. Yeah, bought an old World War II vintage set at Frederick's Music up there across from that fried chicken place on Lamar and 51st Street.
Right.
Yep.
2 J's.
Right in that hood.
Later it became 2 J's.
Yeah, $100. Paper out money. Bought my drum kit.
Yeah.
Had a big old giant bass drum with a sort of a Hawaiian lagoon painted on the canvas.
No.
The calfskin drum head with a light bulb inside. It Probably belonged to some old guy playing at the Villa Capri back in the day, right?
Yeah.
You remember the Villa Capri?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
I had some of my longest weeks in one night at the Villa Capri.
Did you play the Villa Capri?
I used to put bands in there. I did shows there. Interestingly enough, the Villa Capri, which was an iconic hotel, motel, it was right off 35, right around where you and Lynn used to live on the east side of the stadium.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So it's like between, we're going into Austin Manor Road and 32nd. Back then it seemed like it took up blocks, and it was huge. And of course it was a big doggone go-to place for all the football games and
Pure
everything.
mid-century modern Americana, beautiful. The aesthetics of that place.
It
Looked like a
was.
postcard.
You know, the turquoise, you can just imagine the turquoise refrigerator and the olive green range, all of those period colors
Exactly.
of
So you booked
Aussie.
bands in the room there?
Well, what it was is they were between liquor licenses. And I owned Steamboat at a nightclub on 6th Street at the time. And I had a catering license for my liquor license. So I went in with the crew to their Caravan ballroom in there. I think it was called the Caravan. And I helped them book shows. I remember booking Rusty Weir there. And then I'd go in and cater the booze. But even back in the 60s, when I was at UT, somebody had come into town, they'd stay at the Villa Capri, And the rooms all had pictures of Darrell Royal and the Longhorns. I mean, it was kind of like the Longhorn Motel.
I never got inside there.
Oh, you
Too
didn't?
young. My parents would eat there on their anniversary. Here's my little Villa Capri story, though. When I was in Lamar Junior High in 7th grade, in band, I was a bad trumpet player. And the band director was a guy named, I think his name was Vic Williams. And he was a professional tenor sax player. And we would have band at some ungodly early hour during the day at Lamar. It was like maybe the first period, so it was like 9 o'clock. Poor old Vic Williams had just done three sets at the Villa Capri. Of course, clubs closed at midnight back then, but still, it's pretty late. And then he would get up, and I'm not going to say he was hungover, but it was the Villa Capri, and he was a jazz musician. He would come and have to listen to these out of tune horns and kids just messing up, and the look on his face, just the sheer misery of it all.
Oh my
Anyway.
God. Oh my God. A hangover and horns.
I'm not going to say it was a hangover, but
No.
one can imagine.
But it was a late night.
Yeah,
At the very
some
least.
sort of hungover.
Well, for God's sakes, back then, Mike, people had hangovers. People's, were less politically correct. That's back when America had a sense of humor, where...
Not sure I like your tone.
I think we're getting a little progressive.
And everybody smoked.
And
Everybody was
you-
smoking cigarettes.
It was actually promoted. They had doctors come on TV and tell you, this is good for you.
Candy cigarettes.
Yeah, you
Oh my
should
God.
have some
They
of
were
these.
pushing it at the kids, and we all smoked.
Well, yeah, actually, they sold what looked like cigarettes, shaped like cigarettes, and they were just candy.
It's just diabolical.
Yeah, it's like
gosh,
they had
we were
a
having
plan
fun.
or something.
Well, in that whole Madman series, to get back to Bill's dad, it's unfathomable to me that they can keep pouring Johnny Walker and Jamesons and Old Bushmills straight. They walk into a room, they light a cigarette, and they pour the bottle. And then some woman takes her clothes off. That's the way the plots usually go. But period-wise, it's so right.
Oh, yeah.
You're a student of film, all the film noir stuff and everything. Uncle Elmer gets killed in a car wreck. Oh no, you need a drink? It was just amazing.
And then by 1968, about the fourth, did you watch all the seasons? By about 68, they were wearing neighbor jackets and smoking pot.
Oh yeah.
Oh, they've moved on.
Right?
And that's where they featured Bill's dad out there in one of the shots.
It could have been Bill's dad.
It
Yeah.
could have been.
Great show, though.
Yeah. something that I find interesting, which in Western music, by and large, in Western music, which is the music with roots in Europe, with African influences as they came to be understood and integrated into the system in the United States and in North, South, and Central America, we work with 12 notes. There's only 12 tones.
I think I'm just using 5 or 6.
Oh, well, we need to talk.
Have you heard my lick? Yes, you have. Sorry, excuse me for.
No, that's wonderful, Mike. But it's all permutations and combinations of 12 basic
12
tones.
notes. Pretty
And so
kind of mind blowing.
it is. It's I mean, from Beethoven to the Beatles with the same 12 notes.
Wow.
You know, and of course there are quarter notes, eighth notes, and what have you. I think that's one thing why blues captured, you know, a big segment of the popular culture imagination, is when old Blind Lemon Jefferson would take a slide and go, wham.
Yeah.
Well, he's going from a C to a D, but he's going from a C to a C sharpie kind of, a C sharpie kind of, in between the notes, a D flatty, a D flatty to a D, you know. And so there, it bridges the gap between notes. But what made me think about that is you saying, well, yeah, I stole a few licks. Well, of course you did. Doesn't everybody? And I think part of the trick is to having a stable, having a bag of tricks, and making them your own and customizing them as you go along, and to bring that around to listening to the lyrics and making that bridge between the lyrics and how you approach it would be putting your own spin and interpretation on it, you know. And but we all have a basic bunch. We all have a musical inventory from which we work. And you know, back when I was playing with Paul in about '69, our bass player Rusty Keith and I heard this incredible guitar playing going on. We lived up there on 45th Street. You might remember the place.
I do.
Yeah. And right behind us, our little apartment complex, was a short, I think it's called Morrow, M-A-R-R-O-W, or maybe Barrow or something. But a Dr. Johnson lived there. I believe he was a practicing MD. Well, he had a son named Eric. And Eric was 13 or 14 years old at the time. I was like 17 or 18 or 19. Eric was in his earlier teens, mid-teens. And we heard all this incredible music. And so we kind of walked through the weeds and found Eric Johnson over there practicing. And we just, you know, after we kind of jacked our jaws up and went, my God, this is just stunning. And Eric was going through the Clapton regimen. He was going through the T-Bone Walker regimen. He was going through all of the masters, the old blues guys. He was going through the Jeff Beck thing, you know. And from that, he's taken his bag of tricks completely into outer space. Yeah. Completely to new heights, new interpretations, new ways of working at tonality, of looking at tonality, new ways of looking at chord progressions. But it started with the basic bag of tricks. Would you agree with that?
I think a bag of tricks is the operative term now. I'm thinking about the first time it was probably not long after you heard him shedding up there. He had his band called the Electromagnets.
You're darn right.
And I caught them at Castle Creek, and I looked at them, and they looked about 12 years old, although I was about the same age.
Yeah.
And I thought, yeah, that's sure. And then they just proceeded to blow everybody's mind. It was fusion-esque music. I think by that time it was probably
wow.
I forget who was in the band. Couldn't tell you, but it was Eric.
But back then there was Eric was playing with Vince Mariani and had a band called Mariani. We played at King's Village with Mariani, you and me and Rusty and Paffenbach, and Mariani played, and he was a Italian, good-looking kid with this big, you know, kind of East Coast-looking hairdo, and he was really cool, and he had this fringy vest on with the American red, white, and blue, and he had a cymbal back here, and bam, yeah, and I thought that was really cool. Man. And then Charlie Hatchett, the booking agent back then in the late '60s, you know, he brought in bands from all over Texas for these little Sunday afternoon soiree at Kings Village, up on Howard Lane, and back then, that was like halfway to Dallas. I mean, right now it's just part of the Palmer Lane subterfuge, but back then, well, so out, you know, in come these guys, tall, gaunt, and they had these things called roadies. And we'd never heard of a roadie. Well, it was ZZ Top, for Christ's sakes.
I'm still not familiar with the term.
Oh, ZZ Top, they're a
roadies.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I still carry my own gear.
Okay. Well, I can't help you with that, but I can tell you ZZ Top was a conservative string trio, cello, violin, viola, from Houston. Yeah, but we saw them play back then.
I saw them play in a field very close to that area of Austin. I was living in Missouri, but I would visit Austin every summer and you know, check out all the culture and music as a teenager. But it was in kind of a big open field, about 1971.
Okay.
Close to Howard Lane, and they were just wearing cutoffs and mountain boots. They didn't have any of their shtick, but man, they were just fantastic.
That first ZZ Top album is just a mind bonker, you know. Neighbor, neighbor, jump, boom, great stuff, you know. And
How about this band you mentioned that you guys were playing together?
Well, we had a band called Morgan.
This was the two of you?
No, it was four of us. 5 of us started, and one of us graduated from college as an electrical engineer. And
somebody had
to
None
graduate
of the rest of us did.
relatively on time.
Yeah.
And Richard Snyder actually did, and unlike my dad, he followed that into electronic engineering career. You know what can you imagine? But we played. When we started, there were very few places to play. In fact, when we first got together, Jade Room was hardly even having bands. So we were very fortunate. One late night, a woman came up to me crying and needed a place to stay, and just out of the generosity of my heart, I let her bunk in my house. And she ended up coming to one of our very first practices. And she announced at that point, said, I can get you guys jobs. And the next day, she came back and we had a fraternity job, which was the king of the jobs. You know, 2 reasons. One, because they paid well, but mostly because they paid.
Did Charlie Hatchett know about this woman?
No, he did not.
Encroaching upon his territory?
He did not.
Good point.
And she plied that trade and helped us get started. And that's
playing frat parties?
Yeah.
UT campus?
Yeah.
Now what year is this?
69.
1969.
Ish,
Well, 69, yeah, because, and we may have started in 68 actually,
Awesome.
Craig, because my first daughter was born in 70, and...
I was there.
Yes, you were, and I hadn't met her mother yet when we were playing, so...
That's right, because you were hanging out with our manager, whose name was Charlie.
Chuck. I called her Chuck.
Chuck. Okay, that's what we called her.
Craig and I actually met. It kind of reminds me of the Snake Farm song. We met at the Snake Farm.
That's right.
San Marcos there on I-35?
No, this is a pre-Cambrian snake farm. This goes way back in the 60s.
It was on 620.
It was on 620 and the big loop around from 71 to 22, and about halfway between that was...
The Snake Farm.
Yeah.
And
where
it was,
Lakeway is.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
and for whatever reason,
That's now their board of directors, the property owner's board of directors.
Thank you for.
they
I was
let
gonna
us
go
come
there.
in there and practice. And I don't know how
You
what
practiced
that.
at a snake farm?
Yes,
We did.
we did.
Jim, our drummer at that time, before we met Paul, Chuck
Chuck.
Paffenbach, not to be
Oh.
confused with Chuck, the space sharer with Paul.
Nor Chuck Rogers.
Huh?
Or Chuck
Or
Rogers.
Chuck Rogers, who was also a wonderful drummer of that era. Jim had a connection, and some people he knew had a snake farm, but there weren't any snakes in it.
No.
But it was a snake farm.
It was a snake farm.
It was a snakeless farm.
It was a snakeless snake farm.
It was defunct as a
Yeah,
reptile.
and it was the
house.
kind of thing when there were snakes there, they were sharing space.
Yes.
Bada bing.
Yeah, they
Which
didn't.
very, very, very common back then.
Very.
It was shared
But back
space.
to the snake farm.
So, I walk in, and the guy I talked about earlier, Richard Snyder, had found out there was 3 guys who were looking for other people to play. And Richard and I had met in Dallas, Texas, because that's where his family lived. And I'd gone back up to spend the summer with my family. And I went into a music store, and there was one of those cool 3x5 cards that says guitarist looking for someone to play with. Today, you don't want to call that number, but back then it was Tamer. And so I called, and so Richard and I played and jammed. And he told me, he said, I want to let you know in about a week I'm going to move back to Austin. But he said, I've had that card up there all summer, and you're the first guy that's come by. But if you move to Austin, look me up. And I said, okay. And so he gave me his phone number, and he said, I'm living with a couple other guys, and one of them plays drums in a band, actually played with Charlie Hatchett and the Chevelles.
And Al Stahaley.
And Al Stahaley.
And the house was on
It was
Bailey.
Bailey.
It was Bailey
It's
Street.
Bailey
right by
Street.
Seton Medical
Yes,
Center.
sir.
Yeah,
Exactly
it was.
where it was. Well, I didn't have anything else to do at the time, so I thought, I probably should move to Austin. And so I did, and looked him up, went over and met his roommates, and just right off the bat, they said, would you like a job? And I was, boy, it's pretty easy getting into the music business. What are we going to do? And he said, well, you're going to drive the trailer around and be a roadie. So it sounded great to me. It was in the music business. So my first gig was driving the Chevelles trailer from location to location. And as you can imagine, Hatchett will double book any day he could. So he would do a happy hour, and then a fraternity party. And so I had to run up there, of course, get everything set up. Didn't matter, that there was no place to park. You just had to do all that stuff. But it was the greatest job I had in my life, because long about the last set, Al would say, Paul, get up here and sing a song. And so I would. So that was my first foray in. Well, that led to meeting Craig and Jim, the drummer, and Rusty. And the bass player.
Rusty Keith.
And the drummers changed, just like Spinal Tap, I guess. But then the rest of us started playing as a band.
But when you went to the snake farm, me and Jim and Rusty were playing, and you and Richard came in.
Yes.
And you might just comment on that, especially about the boa and the rattlesnake.
Well, we were in a snake farm. The truth of it was that the only boa was the one I had around my neck,
Okay.
and it was feathered. But,
Okay.
but there were no reptiles in there. But I do remember when we were going out there, I told Richard, I said, I probably should take an instrument. And Richard said, what are you going to take? Because I didn't have a guitar or anything, And so I went to Ray Hennig's. Mm-hmm. And back then, Ray Hennig was the nicest guy in the world. I didn't know Ray Hennig from anybody, and I told him, I said, I'm going out to this audition tonight, and I don't have an instrument. And he said, what do you play? Well, I didn't play guitar at all, but I'd taken a few piano lessons, so I knew a few chords. And I said, well, I play the organ. And so he loaned me a farfisa that I took out there, and I actually played only one time with these guys, the first time we practiced, just because I felt so bad because I didn't play an instrument. And fortunately, they played songs that I knew the chords to. Must have played in G and C or something. But I literally borrowed a farfisa so I could be one of the band that I couldn't play at all.
Did you pass the audition?
I passed the audition.
Thank you, Ray.
And you know what they kept saying? Where's the organ?
Well, Paul came to be the lead singer because he had long hair. It was really that simple.
It was that simple.
Yeah.
You know, you just, if you got the look, you got booked.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
That's what Hatchett told us. Well, Hatchett booked us. You know, that was
Charlie Hatch.
Charlie Hatchett.
King of the logistics. He'd book you up in Lincoln, Nebraska on Friday night and say, "Now, fellas, pack up after Lincoln. I got you in Port Aransas, Texas coast on Saturday night, okay?"
That's right.
It's very typical. It's
Yeah.
like just throwing
Very
dots on a
typical.
map.
Charlie in another band after Craig had moved on. You might have been playing with Stephen Frumholtz at this time, but Rusty and I were in another band, and Hatchett was booking us all over. And at that time, he was doing some cool stuff. You know, where you'd book in a club and you'd play from Wednesday through Saturday,
Right.
and that was like, this is a lot better.
Yeah.
But every now and then, you know, I'd throw in, you know, something else. And so we were playing in San Angelo, and he got in touch with us and he said, I got you a job. I said, why don't you? He said, you don't have to come back to Austin. You go to Oklahoma. Have you played in Oklahoma back in those days?
I did. Yeah.
Well, so we said, sure, we'll go.
Get beat up.
Oh my God.
Long hair.
Oh my God. We roll into the club. Man, it's a rough looking place. Anyway, we go in and they're not cordial at all, but you know, we're the band, so they let us in. There's chicken wire in front of the bandstand. And, you know, so we're setting up and the guy's saying, well, you guys never played here before, so let's go over the rules. Said at 2 o'clock, we take a break. It's the alcohol. We have to break for about 30 minutes, and then we'll play to 6.
2 a.m.
Yeah, I'm going, break at 2, play to 6.
What time did you start?
Start at 9.
Such a deal.
Yeah, and so we all huddled and said, you know, we knew enough songs that we could get through 2 full sets, and then for the third set, what we'd do, of course, we had a request to do this one again. And so, you know, we get through a night, you know, where there are 20 or 30 songs. There ain't no way we're playing for 7 hours for several reasons. Anyway, and we did not, but we didn't get paid, but we got out of there alive. But we literally had beer bottles thrown at us. You know, it got so contentious, they were yelling, play something country, and so I yelled, okay, here's a country, it's England, and we played something by the Rolling Stones, you know. Like, wise ass. So anyway, yeah, Charlie would do things like book you in Oklahoma. He booked us in a gay bar one time.
In Oklahoma?
No, it was actually in Waco. This was in Waco, Texas.
Oh, Waco.
Waco.
Much more tolerant
Well,
little place.
Yeah, but you know, we were used to the other sex.
And this was way back before.
This was way back.
That's bizarre.
This was so far back that there was.
They didn't let people dance in Waco. Do you remember that?
Oh well,
Not until
Dancing was
not
prohibited.
until
At the-
2010.
at the gay bar they did.
They did?
Yeah, well they danced.
What was a typical night like at the Armadillo World Headquarters? So, let me share a thought on that. And,
Oh, yeah, I
and
never got to play there.
maybe, well, you know, you went there
Often.
and you went there.
I went there.
Yeah.
But you played there.
Huh?
You played there.
Yeah, I played there. But, you know, one thing I wanted to say about the Armadillo is this. I've done a lot of research on nightclubs in Austin and the Austin music scene. It's something that I'm very, very interested in. Well, the neat part about the Armadillo is, sure, they had incredible bands there. They had, you name it, from Bruce Springsteen to the Pointer Sisters to a lot of the so-called progressive country, redneck rock guys, Willie Whalen. They had...
Commander Cody.
Huh?
Commander Cody.
Commander Cody, you name it. I mean, an incredible cross-section of national bands. And then, of course, Willie Whalen and the Boys and all of that. But, you know, being there at the inception, and Paul and I were both living in Austin when the Armadillo opened in 1970, to me it was more a culture center. And one thing that doesn't get talked about the Armadillo was what they did 6 and 7 nights a week. They had dance shows, they had art shows, they had, good grief, cover dish social dinners, you know, the cakewalks.
Yep.
And I'm exaggerating, but not about the art shows and not about the dance shows and not about the other cultural things. They featured country music acts and against classical music acts, you know, one night this, one night that. And Eddie Wilson and Mike Tollison, Eddie's primary partner. Mike was an attorney then and now, and he, I believe he went to the London School of Economics, if I'm not mistaken, and came back and was, I think he was practicing law in Austin or getting started in the law practice, hooked up with Eddie. Anyhow, Mike Tollison had a very rich cultural view of the world. He was kind of like a Renaissance kind of cosmopolitan guy. And that bled into a lot of the identity of the Armadillo. I mean, you could go there and they had the great nachos from the kitchen, they had the beer garden, they had the Pointer Sisters one night, and they'd have Michael Murphy the next night, and then they'd have
Shiva's Headband.
Shiva's Headband, and then they'd have, the Austin Classical Guitar Society.
Frank Zappa cut a record there.
Frank
Zappa cut a record there. Freddie King cut a career there. I mean, you know, and vice versa.
Yeah.
You know, what was it? Was Armadillo the venue that Freddie built, or was Freddie the act that the Armadillo built? You know, and introducing him to a white. When you look at your Armadillo history, do keep that in mind. And you might check out some of the sources and what have you on this if you're really interested, because it covered the cultural spectrum. And I've always thought Mike Tollison had a lot to do with that. And I'll leave it at that, unless, of course, my friends have any. What nights do you remember? Are there some signature nights at the Armadillo you guys might comment on?
I mentioned Shiva's Headband, and I think that was, you know, at one time to me, the Armadillo and Shiva's Headband were kind of connected. It almost seemed there was you know, they were so culturally different than, you know, than most bands. Mm-hmm. You know, there was the family connection, you know, of the band, and it was just a little more like they were playing at a potluck or something like that.
Plus there was electric violin, which was
Mm-hmm.
kind of new.
They had a different presentation.
Spencer
You know.
Perskin on that violin from North Texas State University.
Yeah.
And
Rest in
Spencer
peace.
was a great cat, and he was in some great company at North Texas State. Eddie Wilson was at North Texas State. Michael Murphy was at North Texas State. Ray Riley Hubbard, I think he actually had a brief stint at North Texas State. And he did so well there, they named a lake after him in Dallas.
Yes, they did.
Get it?
That's good.
That's a yoke. That's a yoke.
Brave combo.
Yeah.
North Texas.
All kinds of people came from North Texas, and then Mike Mordecai and a lot of the guys from the jazz scene.
The big band buses would drive down the main drag at North Texas, the Buddy Rich and the other big bands, and they'd see a kid with a tenor sax and, hey kid, get on the bus. You don't want to be in class the rest of your life. Just get on the bus. Let's make some money.
Is that for real?
That's what I've heard.
I'll be done. But back to the Armadillo. One other thing, yes. Shiva's Headband and Eddie Eddie was Shiva's head band manager.
Okay,
and
that's
I
why they
seem to
were so
recall
much.
reading or Eddie talking about Shiva's head band had one of the first big record deals in Austin in about 70-ish with Capitol Records. And they got an advance, and I think Eddie and Spencer used that money or leveraged that money to open the National Guard Armory into the Armadillo.
Yeah.
But back to any experiences you fellows might have had.
Just as a concert goer, Freddie Fender and Doug Somm, and then the next night it would be Brazilian jazz with my Airto and his wife, Flora Purim. Lots of marijuana smoking, so my memory is a little faulty.
Right.
Sat on the floor. It was a little uncomfortable. Nobody cared. It was about $3 admission in the mid 70s.
You'd sit on the floor and get stuck there.
Stuck and stoned.
Yeah, stuck in stone, right.
Just good vibe. Sound always seemed pretty good. It's just a lot of fun.
My main recollection, was probably because of Eddie Wilson's managing. I saw Shiva a number of times, and one thing there, a guy that ended up playing bass with them went to high school with me, and he moved over to Austin, and literally the first band that he auditioned with was Shiva's. And I think he was one of the first guys that auditioned.
I'll be doggone.
And his name is Mike Cooper. Kind of a sad but interesting note there. He ended up marrying, I think, Johnny Richardson's first wife.
Guitar player Johnny Richardson, yeah.
Plum Nelly to name.
Plum Nelly, Ernie Gamage, sure.
Yeah.
Billy Stoner, yeah.
Going back quite a while, in the old Austin music scene. That was, around 1970, I guess. Is when that happened.
I think we're out of time. Yeah, we're out of time. And so thank you, everybody, for turning on your cyber gizmos to share this wonderful whatever it was with us.